My wife was in the shower when her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. The screen glowed with a message from an unsaved number. 5 words, just 5 words that made my stomach drop to the floor. I miss your kisses. I stood there for a second, just staring at it. You know that feeling when your brain sees something but refuses to process it? Like it goes, nope, not today. We're not doing this today. That was me, standing in my own kitchen, holding a spatula, because I had been making eggs, completely frozen like a man who just walked into a glass door in front of a crowd. I put the spatula down slowly. I picked up the phone. I read it again. I miss your kisses. And then I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the 3 years of small signs I had been ignoring. Maybe it was the gut feeling that had been eating at me for months. Maybe I was just tired. Whatever it was, I did something I had never done in 6 years of marriage. I typed back, "Come over. My husband's not home." I hit send, put the phone back exactly where it was, and I waited. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my front door. I open it, and Pastor Dominic Graham, the man who had married us, the man who counseled us, the man who stood at our wedding altar and told me to love my wife as Christ loved the church, was standing on my porch with a bottle of wine and a smile that lasted about half a second before it collapsed into pure, undiluted horror. Now, let me tell you how it actually happened, because that moment didn't come out of nowhere. And the story is so much worse and honestly so much more satisfying than you're imagining right now. My name is Daniel Cruz. I am 34 years old. I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio, which basically means I spend my days making sure buildings don't fall on people, which is ironic because I could not see my own life falling apart right in front of my face. I am 6 feet tall, reasonably good-looking. My mother would say very handsome. But she's my mother, so her opinion is legally biased. I'm the kind of guy who coaches youth basketball on weekends, remembers everyone's birthdays, and once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring chicken soup to a sick coworker. I say all of this not to brag, but because I want you to understand the kind of man I was, the kind of man who trusted people, the kind of man who saw the best in others even when the evidence was pointing somewhere else entirely. I had been married to Vanessa for 6 years. We met in church, actually, which, in hindsight, should have been the safest possible place to find a faithful partner. But here we are. Vanessa was beautiful, charming, warm in public, the kind of woman who smiled at strangers and volunteered for everything and made everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the room. She was good at that, being everything to everyone. What I didn't know, what I was too trusting, too in love, or maybe just too distracted to see, was that everyone included people who had absolutely no business receiving that kind of warmth from my wife. We didn't have children yet. We had been trying actually, or at least I thought we were trying. In hindsight, I wonder if she was trying at all, or if she was just going through the motions while keeping other options open. That thought haunts me in a way I can barely put into words. I want to pause here and say something important before we go further. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. But I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. Now, back to the story, because it gets so much worse before it gets better. And the better part? Oh, the better part is glorious. The signs had been there for almost a year. I want to be honest about that. I was not completely blind. I noticed things. I just talked myself out of every single one of them because I was not ready to face what they meant. It started small. Vanessa started going to extra church events, a Bible study on Tuesdays, which was new, prayer meetings on Thursday evenings, which was also new, women's ministry on Saturday mornings. I thought, okay, great. My wife is deepening her faith. That's a blessing. I am a supportive husband. I did not question it. Then I noticed she started dressing differently for church. Not dramatically, but enough. A little more put together. More jewelry. More perfume. I told myself she was just making an effort. People do that. They want to look nice for the house of God. Nothing wrong with that. Then there were the phone habits. Vanessa had never been secretive with her phone before. We weren't one of those couples who checked each other's phones, but there was never a reason to feel like we needed to. Her phone was just her phone. She left it on the counter, left it on the bed, never thought twice about it. But around month 3 of the suspicious pattern, her phone started going everywhere with her. To the bathroom, to the laundry room. She started sleeping with it face down, started laughing at messages and then putting the screen away before I could glance over. Started stepping out to the porch to take calls. I asked her once casually who she was talking to. She said it was her friend Renee from the women's ministry group. I had never heard of Renee, but okay, sure, Renee. The thing about being a trusting person is that you start to feel crazy when things are off, because your gut is screaming one thing, but your heart is saying, no, 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 this is Vanessa. You know Vanessa, she wouldn't do this. And so you listen to your heart, which is a terrible idea. By the way, your gut is almost always right. Your heart is a romantic fool who has seen too many movies. I started losing sleep around month 5. Not dramatically, just the kind of sleep you lose when something is wrong, but you can't name it. I'd lie awake next to her and stare at the ceiling and think, something's different. Something has shifted. And then morning would come and she would make coffee and smile at me, and I would think, you are losing your mind, Daniel. This woman is your wife. Stop it. The thing that finally cracked it open for me wasn't dramatic at all. It wasn't catching anything. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a Tuesday in March when I came home from work 2 hours early because a site visit got canceled. I walked and called her name, got no answer. Figured she was out. Went to the kitchen to get water and saw her phone on the counter. Face up. She had left it face up by accident. And there was a notification on the screen from a contact saved only as a letter. Just the letter D. The message preview said, last night was everything. I didn't touch the phone. I put my water down. I walked back outside. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, and I made a decision. I was not going to react. Not yet. I was going to find out exactly what I was dealing with before I said a single word. Because I had seen too many stories where the husband blows up, confronts, and then loses everything in the divorce because he had no proof and looked like the unstable one. I was a structural engineer. I understood the importance of a solid foundation before you build anything. And what I was about to build was a case. So I got myself together. I went back inside. I acted completely normal for 6 more weeks. 6 weeks. I want you to understand what that took. Every dinner, every Sunday service, every goodnight, babe. All of it felt like performing in a play where I knew exactly how it's going to end and nobody else did. It was exhausting and maddening and honestly the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than any engineering exam. Harder than anything. During those 6 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I quietly consulted a divorce attorney just to understand my rights. Just to know what the landscape looked like before I made any moves. The attorney's name was Patricia Okonkwo, and she was sharp as a blade and twice as precise. She told me what to document, what not to do, and what Ohio law said about infidelity. I took notes. Second, I set up a small home security camera in the living room, completely legal in your own home. I didn't hide it in the bedroom. I didn't do anything invasive or illegal. I just put a small device on the bookshelf in the living room, pointed toward the front entrance area, and I waited. Third, and this is a part that still makes my jaw tighten, I started paying closer attention to who D might be, because I had my suspicions, but I needed to be sure. I needed it to be something I couldn't deny, not even to myself. And the answer came to me not through the camera, not through her phone, not through any detective work at all. It came through a prayer request. I know. Even as I say it, it sounds absurd. Our church had a group text thread for prayer requests. One Sunday, Pastor Dominic sent a message asking the congregation to pray for his upcoming personal retreat. He needed time for reflection and spiritual renewal, he said. He would be unavailable for most of the following week. That same week, Vanessa told me she was going to visit her sister in Cincinnati for a few days. Her sister Lisa, who I liked fine, who lived about 2 hours away. I said, okay, have a great trip. Drive safe. Love you. I did not go to work that week. I called her sister Lisa on Tuesday morning, just say hi and ask how things were going with Vanessa there. Long pause on the line. Then Lisa, who clearly did not know she was supposed to cover, said, "What do you mean? Vanessa's not here. I haven't seen her in 3 months." There it was. I thanked Lisa calmly, told her it must have been a miscommunication, and hung up. Then I sat very still for a very long time. That was when I knew for certain, not just suspected, knew. And now I had to decide what kind of ending this story was going to have. Here's something I want to say directly, because I think some of you listening might be in the middle of something like this right now. You might be at that point where you know, but you're not sure what to do with the knowing. You're scared of the chaos that comes next. You're questioning yourself. You're wondering if you're overreacting. You are not overreacting. And while you're processing that, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is far from over, and you do not want to miss what comes next. What Daniel does with this information is the part nobody expected, not even Daniel himself. I did not call Vanessa. I did not blow up. I did not call Pastor Dominic. I did not post anything on social media or call my boys or do anything that would let either of them know that I knew. What I did was go to church that Sunday and smile at Dominic Graham like everything was completely fine. Let me describe Pastor Dominic for you, because the picture matters. He was 51 years old, silver at the temples, strong handshake, the kind of voice that filled a room without a microphone, which was something he was very proud of and reminded the congregation of more often than necessary. He wore good suits. He quoted scripture fluently and seemed, by every surface measure, to be a man of deep integrity and genuine faith. He had been our pastor for 11 years. He had counseled us before our wedding. He sat across from me and Vanessa at a small table in his office and told us that marriage was sacred, that communication was everything, that no temptation was worth destroying what God had brought together. He had said that to my face, while apparently already being exactly the kind of temptation he was warning me about. I cannot even fully explain the particular flavor of betrayal that is. It is not just being cheated on. It is being lied to by the very institution you trusted to guide you. It is looking at someone who spoke truth to you from a pulpit and realizing the whole time he was smiling at your wife in ways he had no right to smile. Vanessa came home from her fake Cincinnati trip on Thursday. She walked in with a bag, kissed me on the cheek, asked what was for dinner. I made pasta. We watched TV. She showed me pictures from her trip. I later noticed they were all reposts from her sister's Instagram from months ago. She had just saved them and pretended they were current. The attention to detail in the deception was honestly kind of impressive, in a horrifying way. It was that Friday morning, 2 days after she got home, when everything came together. I was making eggs. Vanessa was in the shower. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, face up. It lit up. Unknown number. I miss your kisses. And something in me just snapped. Not in rage, not in panic, in clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've been carrying something for months and suddenly the weight just becomes unbearable and your hand stops shaking and your mind goes perfectly, terrifyingly still. I picked up her phone. I typed back, "Come over. My husband's not home." I put the phone down. I finished making my eggs. I ate them, calmly, looking at the front door. 10 minutes later, knock, knock. I opened the door. Pastor Dominic Graham was standing on my porch in a casual jacket, holding a bottle of Pinot Noir, smiling a smile that had absolutely no idea what it had just walked into. The smile lasted maybe half a second, because I was standing there, in my own house, very much home. The blood drained from his face, so fast you would have thought someone pulled the drain plug. The bottle of wine tilted in his hand. His mouth open, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. I stepped aside and said, "Come in, Pastor. We need to talk." He didn't move. "Come in," I said again. Still calm, still quiet. "My wife is in the shower. I'm sure you know where the bathroom is." That last line, I did not plan it. It just came out. And from the way his knees almost buckled, I think it landed exactly the way it should have. He came inside, sat down in the living room. I sat across from him, and for a full 30 seconds, neither of us said anything. The shower was still running in the background. The sound of it was almost surreal, like a ticking clock. "Daniel," he started. "Don't," I said. "Just don't. Not yet." He closed his mouth. "I'm going to tell you something," I said. "I have known about this for almost 2 months. I have not said anything to Vanessa. I have not said anything to you. I have not said anything to anyone in this church or in this community. I have been very patient, and I have been very quiet, and I have been gathering everything I need. And now you are sitting in my house with a bottle of wine you brought for my wife. And I need you to understand that the game is over." He put the wine down on the coffee table. His hand was shaking. The great booming voice of our congregation was completely gone. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him look. "Is she?" He started again. "She doesn't know I know," I said. Yet, right on cue, the shower stopped. We both heard it. I watched Dominic's eyes go to the hallway, then back to me. The pure terror on his face in that moment was something I will never forget. Not because I enjoyed his suffering, maybe a little, I'm only human, but because after months of feeling crazy and blind and powerless, watching this man who had preached to me about integrity sit in my living room and fall apart, it confirmed something. I was not the fool in this story. I had just been the most patient person in it. Vanessa came out of a hallway in a bathrobe, toweling her hair, and walked into the living room without looking up. "Babe, have you seen my—" She looked up. She saw Dominic, and then she saw me. And the look on her face was the second best moment of the entire thing. There's a specific expression a person makes when their two separate worlds collide in the worst possible way, and they realize all at once that everything they thought they were hiding has been visible all along. It is not just shock. It is the collapse of an entire constructed reality. Every lie, every cover story, every fake Cincinnati trip. All of it crashing down in the span of about 2 seconds. Vanessa grabbed the doorframe. "Daniel," she whispered. "Hi," I said. "You have a visitor." What happened next took about 2 hours, and I will not pretend it was clean or pleasant. There was crying. There was denial, which I found almost insane given that the evidence was standing in our living room holding a bottle of wine. There was the moment Vanessa said, "It's not what you think," and I had to actually work to keep a straight face, because what I was thinking was watching a man come to my front door with wine to visit my wife while I was supposedly not home. And I am a structural engineer, not a poet, but I understood the structure of that situation pretty clearly. Then there was the moment Dominic tried to speak, tried to compose himself into something resembling a pastor, and started talking about how he had been going through a difficult time in his own marriage, and how these things were complicated, and how he hoped we could handle it with grace and dignity. Grace. This man came to my house with wine for my wife, and he was asking me for grace. I told him very quietly that grace was something I would be offering to God when this was all said and done, but that what I was offering to him and Vanessa right now was a choice. They could handle this the easy way, or they could handle it the hard way, the easy way. Vanessa agrees to an uncontested divorce. No games, no attempts to hide assets, no drawn-out court battle. She gets what she brought into the marriage. I keep what I built. We sign, we part, we move on. The hard way, I go to the church board with everything I have, including dates, the security footage from the living room, the text messages, the receipts from the hotel in Cincinnati I had already located through some very careful searching, and the statement from Lisa confirming that Vanessa was never there. Pastor Dominic loses his position, possibly his marriage, definitely his reputation in a community he had spent 11 years building. And Vanessa gets to fight a contested divorce with a judge who will be reading a very detailed account of everything. Dominic left my house within 5 minutes of that offer. Vanessa sat on the couch for a long time after he left, not speaking, not crying anymore, just sitting. I got up, made myself some more coffee. I make really good coffee. It is one of my better qualities, and came back and sat across from her. I still love you, she said finally. I know, I said, and I meant it, because love doesn't just turn off. I wish it did sometimes, but it doesn't. That's not the question anymore. She looked at me for a long time. How long have you known? Long enough, I said. She nodded slowly. She looked at the wine bottle still sitting on the coffee table. Then she looked away from it. He told me you would never find out, she said quietly. He said you trusted me too much to ever look. I let that sit in the air for a moment. He was right, I said. For a long time, he was completely right. That was the end of the conversation that night. She slept in the guest room. I slept in our bed, which felt strange and also, somehow, like the first peaceful sleep I had gotten in months. There is something about the truth, even when it is brutal, that lets your body finally rest. Vanessa signed the divorce papers 14 days later. Patricia Okonkwo, my attorney, said it was one of the cleanest splits she had handled in a while. Vanessa did not fight any of it. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she just knew she had nothing to stand on. Either way, the process was as smooth as these things can be, which is not very smooth, but at least it was fast. The house was mine. I had put down the full down payment before we married, and the mortgage was in my name. She took her car, her personal savings, her clothes, and furniture from the bedroom. I helped carry some boxes to the truck because I am who I am, and she looked at me like she couldn't understand how I was being that calm. I wasn't calm on the inside, if I'm being honest. I was gutted. I missed the version of her I thought she was. I missed the idea of the marriage we were supposed to have. I missed having someone to come home to. I missed my life as I had understood it. But grief and justice are not enemies. You can mourn something and still make sure the truth is told. You can hurt and still refuse to be a doormat. I told exactly 3 people what happened. My brother Kevin, my friend Terrence, and my mother. My mother cried. Kevin said several things I cannot repeat here. Terrence, who has been my best friend since 7th grade and who had disliked Vanessa from year 1, and had the grace to never say, I told you so, at least not directly, simply said, when you're ready to get out of the house, call me, which I appreciated more than I could say. I did not go to the church board immediately. I want to be honest about that. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to stand up in that building on a Sunday morning and expose everything and watch the whole comfortable-like collapse in front of the congregation that had been reading devotionals written by a man who was visiting my wife. the anger in me that was real, and I am not going to pretend it wasn't. But I made myself wait, not out of kindness to Dominic, out of strategy, because what I had learned in those 2 months of silent patience was this: revenge that is rushed is just reaction. Revenge that is patient is architecture. And I was very, very good at building things that lasted. Let me stop right here for a second and say something. If you have been listening to this story and you're feeling something, anger recognition, maybe a little bit of your own pain, I want you to know that's what this is for. These stories exist to remind us that we are not alone in what we go through, that other people have walked through fire and come out the other side. If this story is doing that for you, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe and share it. Not for me, for the next person who needs to hear it at 2 in the morning when they don't know what to do. Stories like this are worth sharing. And the algorithm only moves when real people push it forward. So if this means something to you, take 5 seconds and subscribe. Now let's finish this, because the best part is still coming. Dominic Graham had been pastor of Grace Fellowship Church for 11 years. In that time, he had built something real. The church had grown from about 80 members to nearly 400. They had a food pantry, a tutoring program for kids in the neighborhood, a marriage counseling ministry and I want to let the irony of this fully land, was one of their most attended programs. He had a wife, Eleanor, who was a soft-spoken, deeply kind woman who taught elementary school and volunteered at the food pantry every Saturday. 2 adult children who were both active in the church, a reputation that was built brick by brick over more than a decade. I had no desire to destroy Eleanor. She was innocent. She was, in a very real sense, in the same position I had been in, except she didn't know it yet. What I did was go to 2 of the church elders, not in a rage, not with an ultimatum. I went in with a folder, a quiet folder, documented, organized, clear. I sat down with Elder Raymond Brooks, who I had known for years and trusted as a genuinely honorable man, and I told him everything, calmly. I handed him the folder. I told him what I needed him to do with it and why. Elder Brooks didn't say much during our meeting. He looked at the contents of the folder carefully. He asked a few clarifying questions. He thanked me for coming to him directly rather than making it public. He said the board would handle it according to their process, and he gave me his word that they would. I believed him, and I was right to. Pastor Dominic Graham resigned from Grace Fellowship Church 6 weeks later. The announcement was framed as a personal decision for family and spiritual reasons, which was not entirely a lie, just a very carefully edited version of the truth. The congregation didn't know the full story, but Eleanor did. The elders made sure she was informed privately, with support, before any announcement was made. I felt right about that. She deserved to know. I heard through the grapevine, maybe 3 months later, that Eleanor had filed for divorce. I felt a deep, complicated sadness about that. She had not done anything wrong, but she deserved the truth more than she deserved a comfortable lie. And at least now she could build something real. Now here is where I have to tell you about the part one did not plan, the part that still catches me off guard when I think about it. About 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at the hardware store because I had been slowly renovating the guest room, which in my mind was both a practical project and a personal one, a way of making the house feel like mine again. And I ran into a woman named Claire. Claire was reaching for the same brand of wood stain I was reaching for. We both grabbed it at the same time, looked at each other, and she laughed. Not a self-conscious laugh, just a genuine surprised, isn't that funny kind of laugh. We talked for about 15 minutes in the paint aisle. She was renovating her apartment. She had strong opinions about the difference between semi-gloss and satin finish, which I found both charming and slightly intense. She worked as a physical therapist. She had an easy, direct way of speaking that I was not used to. No performance, No carefully constructed image, just a person talking to another person. I almost didn't ask for her number. Old habits, old wounds, the voice in the back of my head going, "You don't know her. You've been wrong before. Be careful." But Terrence had told me something a few weeks before that I kept coming back to. He said, "Daniel, don't let what she did make you into someone who can't receive good things anymore. That's the second betrayal. Don't let her do that to you too." So I asked for her number. She gave it to me. I want to be clear. This is not a story that ends with a new romance solving everything. That is not how real life works, and I respect you too much to pretend it is. Claire and I went on 3 dates before I even felt comfortable being fully present on one. I was guarded in ways I hadn't been before. There were moments where my trust had to be rebuilt from scratch, not just in her, but in myself and my own ability to read a situation accurately. But she was patient. She didn't push. She just kept being exactly who she was, and slowly, that consistency became something I could rest in. We have been together for 8 months now, and I am not going to tell you it's perfect, because nothing is, but I will tell you it is real. And after everything I went through, real is the most beautiful thing I can imagine. Here is what I want to say about revenge, because I think people misunderstand it. The best revenge is not destruction. I could have stood up in that church and burned Dominic's reputation to the ground in front of 400 people. I could have made the whole thing loud and ugly and public and satisfying in a very short-term way. And for about 5 minutes it would have felt incredible. But what would it have built? What I did instead was quiet, deliberate, and permanent. I protected myself legally. I told the truth to the people who needed to hear it. I gave Eleanor the dignity of knowing the truth privately before her life was upended. I let the process work, and then I got out of the way and let everything fall where it was going to fall anyway. Dominic lost his church. He lost his marriage. He lost the reputation he had spent 11 years building. Not because I destroyed him, because he destroyed himself. And I simply made sure the truth was documented and delivered. Vanessa moved to Atlanta. I heard she started over there. I genuinely hope she finds whatever she was looking for, because whatever it was, she clearly wasn't finding it in our marriage. And I deserve someone who is actually there. The house is mine. The guest room has new floors and a really excellent wood stain that Claire helped me pick out. My mother still calls every Sunday morning, and every time she does, she asks if I've found a nice girl yet, even though I've told her about Claire 3 times. Because my mother processes information at her own pace and on her own timeline. Kevin came to visit last month, and we stayed up until 2 in the morning talking about everything. The kind of conversation you can only have with family. And at one point he said, "You know what I respect most about how you handled it? You never stopped being yourself. You were hurt, but you never turned into somebody ugly." I sat with that for a while. I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. Not that I caught them. Not that Dominic resigned. Not even the clean divorce. It's that I went through one of the worst experiences of my adult life, and I came out of it still knowing who I was. Still able to laugh. Still able to make eggs on a Friday morning. Still able to stand in a hardware store and talk to a stranger about wood stain. They didn't take that from me. And that, more than anything, is the victory. I want to end this story with something I have never said out loud before. The night after I opened that door and saw Dominic Graham standing on my porch after the conversation, after Vanessa went to the guest room, after the house went quiet, I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time. No TV, no music, just me and the sound of the house settling. And I thought about all the Sundays I had sat in that church and listened to sermons about integrity, about keeping your word, about what it means to be a man of your word in a world that makes it easy not to be. And I thought, he was wrong about everything except the lessons. The lessons were right. Integrity matters. Your word matters. What you build with your life matters. He just forgot he was supposed to actually live them. I didn't forget. I went to sleep that night knowing exactly who I was. And I woke up the next morning still that person. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. If this story meant something to you, if it moved you, or made you think, or made you feel a little less alone in your own hard season, share it. Subscribe. Drop a comment below, and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part hit you the hardest. I read every single one. And to my mother, who said I wouldn't reach 1,000 subscribers. Hi, Mom. I love you. You were wrong. This has been Daniel's story. Thank you for listening.